Hello, I'm here in conversation with our poet in residence, Sister Luella Hickman. I'm Sister Emma Marie Stillman. I welcome you today to hear about poetry in general, but especially Sister Luella's books. She has published two, and we're going to talk about some of the aspects of those poems. Hello, Sister.
Hello, Sister Emma.
So why is poetry important to you, Sister Luella?
First of all, I could say that it expresses what I am feeling, but more than that, it helps me to express what I see other people experiencing, making observations on people's behavior, situations, nature, and what I read, that sort of thing. However, I could say that why have a reason for why it's important? For example, I don't have a reason for my friend or my wife or my daughter or my husband. They're important to me because they're people, and they're important to me just because they're people.
Yes. And how does a poem begin for you?
It all depends. Sometimes I will see something and it will click, or I will have a thought and it may go on for several days, and I will think about it, and it might evolve. Sometimes I wake up 2 o'clock in the morning and poof, there's something that I need to put down, so I open up my computer and there we go.
Instant, spontaneous inspiration.
Exactly.
And you jot it down. Where do you find inspiration?
Like I mentioned before, just about everywhere. In fact, I was working on a poem for my first book, and I noticed a T-shirt, and it had wildfire on it. And I went, oh, and I went from there and wrote a poem about St. Joseph. And it just can come from anywhere, nature. Someone may say something. I might get a thought from a book. Sometimes I overhear a conversation and something is beautifully said, and I try to honor that.
Would you read something for us from your book?
Yes. One of the things that I like to do is try to see through the eyes of someone else. One of the things I try to stay away from is morality, trying to set up my agenda. However, there are some poems that I like to do both. Every once in a while, I do have a poem that is on my agenda, but seeing through the eyes of someone else. And this is seeing through the eyes of indigenous, and I like to say First Peoples, giving voice to the thousands of missing and murdered indigenous women, both in the United States and Canada. Perhaps if there had been fewer faces, with one or two images that the public could not unsee, with names that could lead to protests, those costly catalysts for change. But there were too many of us for rage. We were the sacred life bearers, like our mother, the earth, and with our deaths, we will also no longer nurture or create beauty. We will never be the beautiful old ones, the wisdom guides, as well as the two-spirit women among us, likewise life-giving and creative. Vanish, shot, strangled, beaten, raped, then left to die alone. This was our fear. This is now our grief. There are too many of us for rage.
Sounds like it's pretty much up to date.
Very much so.
My goodness, sure is. Is poetry a calling?
In a way, yes. It is something I cannot not do. It's something almost like a compulsion. However, that's, I think, a gift in a way. It is a lens through which I see the world and other people, how I respond. And I even have a small pad in my place in the chapel. Every once in a while I will get a thought, perhaps before I pray or after or during what I pray, and I jot it down. I even have a little notebook in my purse, because as I mentioned, when I'm out, I might hear something or read something, and I jot it down and put it in my pocket and open up my computer a little later.
Sounds like you're a pretty creative person.
Well, I hope so.
You're creating very originally.
I started writing when I was in 8th grade, and I think a lot of preteens and teenagers turn to the arts because I think they need to, we need to express what they cannot ordinarily express. Many of them turn to music, and I think it was the same for me, that being a young person, all people need an outlet of some type.
Do you have a favorite word?
That's an interesting question. I've never been asked that, but I would say all of them, given their due respect, because they're there to express something, and all language needs to be respected in its context. It's not there. Sad to say, many words are used as weapons to hurt people. However, words are there to be honored and respected.
Right. Isn't that true? What is your favorite poem and your favorite poet?
I have several favorite poets. One of them is Elizabeth Bishop. Several years ago, I happened to read an article about her, and I became very fascinated with her life. Mm-hmm. So I bought several of her books, her poetry, and even her letters. Elizabeth only published about 100 poems in her life, but she has thousands and thousands of letters that are interesting and very engaging.
Why did you select her out of the others?
Her poems tell a story. One of my favorite poems of hers is The Moose, and it's an encounter of people on a bus at night, and they encounter a moose on the road, and it becomes something very transcendent, something of humanity encountering the sacred in nature, and I really appreciate that. Another poet of mine is Denise Leveroff. She was born in England. She came to the United States. Her father was a Hasidic rabbi and converted and became an Anglican priest. And so she really had no schooling at all. She was homeschooled and read widely. She had a great heritage from her father, and she eventually became Catholic. And her spiritual poems are just exquisite. She had a great fondness of Julian of Norwich, and she was also a great sense of the presence of God in nature. She was very much sensed this very precise and very beautiful poems about nature.
You seem to be very connected with and inspired by things of nature that bring you more and more closely to the sacred. Am I right?
That's right. That's right. To see God in everything. Mm-hmm. And finally, my last poet that I am really appreciate, and I'm reading her collected book poems now, is Maya Angelou. And she is quite herself in her poetry, very much herself.
Many of us are familiar with her. Very good.
Very much so. Very much so.
Very inspiring. Yes. What goal do you have in writing?
I really don't have a goal. As I mentioned earlier, that's an agenda. However, I have, like I said, I have several poems that I have an agenda for, and I think I'm allowed that. Yes. However, for example, one poem I have, I think really describes my sentiments about having an agenda. This actually happened a number of years ago. One of our associates came to supper one evening, and she was standing in front of me in line for supper. And she had just gotten her second diagnosis, she had cancer of the hip in her bone. And the first doctor misdiagnosed her. And she turned to me and she said, "Sister Lou, would you write me a poem, please?" And then she turned around and we went to the supper line and we ate and she left. And so this is the poem that I wrote for her. I sent it off to Byline magazine, and the editor, this was the last poem the editor accepted of mine because she too died of cancer, and hers was inoperable brain cancer. For Betty with cancer who asked for a poem. Like you, living, I put pen to paper, not knowing where the lines will end. I too do not know where I am going until I get there, but the poem is everything: road, map, compass, the very engine driving. And what makes this poem very unique was I sent it to Byline magazine afterwards, and the poetry editor, Betty, was also dying of cancer, and it was inoperable brain cancer.
And her name was Betty, too.
Exactly, sister. Exactly.
You were surprised, Sister Luella, to discover that your poems, as a matter of fact, 5 of them, were put to chamber music.
Yes.
And where was this?
Several years ago, I got an email from my publisher, Kevin Watson, and he had forwarded an email to him from a gentleman. In fact, his birthday was, James's birthday was yesterday. James Lee III, who is an up-and-coming African-American composer here in the United States. And he was requesting permission from my community to use some of my poems in a concert that was going to be given at Y92 in New York City. And Y92 in New York City is the Jewish equivalent to the YMCA. And it has been in New York for about 150 years.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yes.
Fascinating.
Right. It was a benefit concert. Later, there was a concert in Philadelphia. There was one in Cleveland.
And they were played there?
Yes.
Chamber music, huh?
Yes, the music. The music was entitled Hava's Daughters Speak. And it was also, as I said, in Philadelphia and in Dallas. There was at a university in Georgia, and also in Sable Island, right off of Florida, that was sponsored. So there was a total of 6 concerts.
And there are some that are in the future also, right?
I would hope so. My editor, Tom Lombardo, is interested in having something. He plays in a small band, and he's interested in having something for him. First Methodist on Shoreline is interested in having a concert there in the spring sometime. I will be getting back to the music director sometime in March or April and see what they can do with the music. And it's really interesting. The clarinetist who plays for First Methodist studied with Anthony McGill, who was the clarinetist for Hava's Daughters Speak. It's for a trio, clarinet, piano, and soprano solo. If any of you are interested in obtaining a copy, you can contact Kevin Watson, who is publisher of Press 53, and his phone number is 336-770-5353. or you can buy it online with Amazon.com and Barnes and Nobles online. The title of the book is Writing the Stars.
Writing the Stars. Thank you so much, Sister Luella.
Thank
Really
you.
enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you. I did too. Thank you for your time.
Bless you.